Okay, the time is 4 o'clock. I will go ahead and call the Plan Commission meeting to order in person and via Zoom, Tuesday, December 13th, here at City Hall and via Zoom. Roll call, please.
Commission member Highfield,
Present.
Kesenick,
Present.
Lesko Hair,
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
Gray,
Here.
engineer Selly,
Here.
manager Lemire.
Here. Thank you. I will just a note of welcome for our newest commission member, Lauren Gray, who was appointed by the approval of the city council on Tuesday, the 6th of December. So welcome.
Thank you.
He's got a ton of experience on city council as well as the plan commission. So you will be a valued member of our team here. Thank you for volunteering. Yes. Okay, next on the agenda, review and possible action relating to the minutes of the November 22nd, 2022 regular plan commission meeting.
I have a correction. I was absent for that meeting and it is listed there, but I'm also in the present commissioners. And I don't see. No, I didn't show up at all.
Okay.
I will make that correction.
And then I don't know if Commissioner Lesko here is mentioned in the minutes, but he's not in the roll call, and Eric Schultz also.
Anybody else have questions or comments about anything else in the minutes? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended by Commissioner Kesenick.
So moved. Commissioner Schultz.
Thank you.
Highfield, second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Next on the agenda is review and possible action relating to site plan review for DB Oaks located at 700 Oak Street. This is site plan review -2022-10. Engineer Selly.
Yeah, thank you. This is the DB Oak site is the site of the fire that we had last summer. I think that's the easiest way to describe it in town. The footprint roughly of the building that burned is what we're talking about today. The building is owned by Randy Knox and Harmon Boss with Boss Design Builders is putting forward a new building for this particular location for Mr. Knox. This request is a little not unusual, I'd say, but a little different than those that we typically see in that when a site plan comes through for our review, it includes both the let's call it the campus, which would be the landscaping, the roadways that allow us to get to and from the building and the building itself. Because of some circumstances surrounding the acquisition of materials for this building and some wetlands that are on the site that are not able to be characterized during the wintertime, the request was made to move forward with just the review of the building for this site. The building itself will be used for warehousing, which is a permitted use by right within this zoning, so there's no concerns there. And we did review the building for conformance with our zoning code in terms of mainly the aesthetics with this particular building. These buildings in the past have been built without a whole lot of attention paid to the exterior, and our new zoning code has some accommodations to be made to kind of improve the look of these, which they have done. So the two different colors that you see here, as well as the masonry skirt around the bottom, is part of that aesthetic improvements. Now, mind you, we are in an industrial zoning area, so we're not looking for works of art here by any means, but certainly the improvements that were made are in conformance with the code. The second part of this submittal for our review will come likely after the first of the year. And that is where we will look at the ingress and egress for this particular location, the landscaping plan, and how we will manage the wetlands that are on site. So those have been delineated, but the DNR needs to weigh in as to the quality of those wetlands and what options are available for us to get vehicles in and out. As part of that, we have asked, and Mr. Knox and Mr. Boss have been amenable to not allowing any building permits out on the site until such time as the final components of that site plan review come forward to the Planning Commission. So they were okay with that. This step of review allows them to accomplish what they needed in terms of the ordering of materials and planning for the building for a 2023 build. So with that, I don't believe I've missed anything in there. But I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission members may have related to this request. And I will note that Mr. Boss and Mr. Knox are in the audience. If we have any questions of them, they can step to the podium as well.
I will just note on page 4 of the staff report, that includes the staff recommendation, which I will just read those for the record, I think, just so everybody understands, and then we can confirm with the applicants that they agree with all of those as well. So it says staff recommends approval of the site plan for the building only, subject to the following conditions: that the applicant shall complete any and all DNR required remediation efforts as part of the fire cleanup. The applicant shall complete all DNR requirements or required wetland analysis. The applicant shall submit a complete site plan package with all required elements as outlined in the zoning ordinance, section 15.10.42, prior to the issuance of any building permits for the proposed building expansion, subject to review and approval by the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission shall approve appropriate access from a public right-of-way with the approved site plans, and then any other recommendations from staff or the Plan Commission that stem from this meeting. So I just want to ask the applicants to confirm that those conditions are acceptable. Yep, and I'll just note for the record that Mr. Knox did indeed agree to that. So from that point, we can certainly discuss by the Plan Commission. If there's any questions for the applicant, they can come up and introduce themselves. If there's questions for Engineer Selly or myself, now is the time for the Plan Commission to do so.
I do have a question. I don't know if it would be for city staff or the developer. I guess it's sort of a two-part question. Is there a master plan to develop the railway to extend the bike path?
There is a desire to do so by the city. We have reached out to the railroad several times. The last was within a year ago, and they did not have any interest in vacating that existing railway at this time. So,
Okay.
but I believe that's in our comprehensive plan, the extension of that along that section.
All right. And whether or not it ever happened, would that impact the setback requirements along that?
No, it would not.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from the Plan Commission, either of the staff report, the recommendation, or the unique nature of this approval as mentioned by Engineer Selly? Usually we do the whole package, not the building and the site separately, but we want to accommodate the applicant in ordering these building materials. So I'm trying to be flexible and support the redevelopment of this property.
Yeah, a question more out of curiosity. I guess it appears that these spaces would be leased or rented out. I'm kind of curious what kind of intended market are the owners kind of reaching out to fill or rent out those spaces.
Randy, did you want to answer that?
Yeah.
Please. The microphones are what allow the folks on the Zoom calls to hear.
Is the button green?
It is.
It is green.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Um,
Can you-
Our
can you state
expect-
your- Can you state your name and address?
oh,
for
I'm
the record,
sorry,
please?
Randy Knox, on behalf of DB Oak Limited Partnership. Our expected tenants, are primarily small businesses, contractors, people who need a place to store their gear and stage their operations from before they go out to their job sites. There seems to be a shortage of that kind of space available, and by the same token, we are planning the construction so that if somebody who needed a larger space, if it would work for them, that we could connect two or more of the units to each other so that they could have a greater space. But there are very few demands for very large warehousing spaces. There's a lot of demand for smaller ones.
And would there be
Thank you.
vehicle storage in there? Would there be vehicles stored there or overnight there?
I could see trailers. I don't expect any vehicle storage.
Randy, is this the same sort of business that you now have at the east or the south end of the building?
Not totally. The south end has a few of these small contractor types, but the largest amount of space is rented by Opportunities. They store a lot of product there for primarily for Nestle's out of Jefferson. And then there's another company called Blackhawk Group that is, I guess I'd call it a server farm, that is occupying 20,000 plus square feet. The rest of them are all much, much smaller portions.
Randy, do you perform some sort of market analysis to determine the demand for this type of storage?
I don't know. I haven't done any kind of formal survey. It's all anecdotal. It's people coming to the fellow who has managed the property for me and saying, have you got space?
Okay.
And people that he knows are already looking.
Mhm. Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Knox?
Okay, any other?
Yeah, yes. Hey, this is Commissioner Lesko here. I have a question for Mr. Knox. As far as like timeline goes, when would you like to have, ideally, when would there be occupants in this revised structure?
Well, we've got some processes to go through with the DNR because of the wetland delineation in the wooded area north of the buildings that has the potential to affect access, and we have to get those details worked out with the DNR. Then we have to come back here for actual building permits. It's anticipated as a steel construction building, and steel is a little more expensive than it used to be, and they require, we expect at least $500,000 down payment just with the order. So, and then the delivery times can easily be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months, depending on the supplier. So it's been a year and 5 months since the fire. It's been a long time waiting. We're finally to this stage. And we finally have occupancy on the part of the building that wasn't burned. But I can't promise a given timeline. Obviously, it's in my best interest to get it to a revenue generating point as soon as I can. Because it's been a long time without, and the expenses keep coming in, whether you got the revenue or not. But I don't have a firm date that I could lead you to expect.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments from the Plan Commission?
If not, we appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would move to approve the site plan review for DB Oaks building only located at 700 Oak Street, subject to the conditions recommended by staff and included in the staff report.
I will second
Second.
that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any final questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. Next on the agenda is review and possible action relating to the airport improvement resolution for the Fort Atkinson Municipal Airport. Engineer Selly.
Yeah, thank you. Let me pull up just a quick explanation here of what we've got going on. So many of you hopefully know that Fort Atkinson has a municipal airport. It's located between here and Jefferson. Strategically, of course, between the two metropolises, for its metropoli for its use. But anyway, it is a phenomenal piece of infrastructure, and the reason for that is it's well funded by the FAA. And that money comes through and is administered by the Wisconsin Bureau of Aeronautics to accomplish various projects out at the airport. Those projects are literally everything that you could imagine that would be somehow related to an airport. We are asked on a relatively frequent basis to provide a list of projects that we would like to see moved forward. And the commitment from the Bureau of Aeronautics is that they will essentially manage these projects for us. And we have significant input in them, but they essentially do all the dirty work, if you will, involved in this. Our commitment for funding to these projects ranges anywhere from 3% to 5%. It's capped, I think, at 5%. There may be one or two categories that get us to 10%, but it's a very lucrative situation for the city to be in. The components of the project petition, which has come before you this evening to take a look at, are largely within two categories: maintenance categories and capital investment categories. Maintenance is exactly as it says. The pavements out there, much like streets, need to be maintained. The paint's wearing off from the striping. It's time to seal coat and crack fill those existing pavements. We have some lighting out there that could use some improvements. And then we have some significant capital investments that are kind of on our wish list, if you will. So the potential new construction of hangars, we have requests about once a month. Once every other week or so, about 2 to 3 times a month, asking for hangar space out at the airport. We have plenty of space to build a hangar, but we do not have spaces with already built hangars. Land acquisition, there are some private properties in the area that we would like to see acquired by the airport for future planning purposes. And then, of course, snow removal equipment and runway expansion. All of those sound very pie in the sky, but they do have some very real benefits to our airport as we look at the future. And that's really governed by the last bullet there, the airport master plan. So in the past, we've been a little reluctant. I shouldn't say reluctant. We've been a little lax in developing a master plan for the airport. The BOA has allowed most of the improvements that we've done in the last several decades out there to move forward without the master plan. And I think that was because many of those were just obvious. So we put in a new fuel facility within the last couple of years at the airport. Certainly, we don't need to master plan that. We knew that it was a necessary item that we had to do. But as we start talking about runway expansion, land acquisition, construction of hangars, terminal buildings, facilities, that requires some dedicated thought and really a long-term vision. And that's what that master plan will require or will force us to really think about. They're very expensive. Master plans, I guarantee if anybody threw a number out here, we would multiply it by 10. And that would be the cost of the master planning effort. I was myself taken aback by the cost of these, but they are expensive because the FAA requires a fairly rigorous analysis. So that is part of the petition that we will put forward. The procedure here is that the Planning Commission takes a look at this petition and the petition itself. Pull up the view of that here. Oops. The petition itself was included in the packet. It looks quite formal, but the boilerplate language is here except for what I have highlighted. And this is where essentially we'll ask the city council to pass this resolution that indicates that we would like a snowplow and that we'd like to do some master planning and improvements of the lighting and things of that nature. So this is the procedure that will come before the council for their vote and hopefully concurrence. But the step before that is for the Planning Commission to take a look at this. So although the airport does not come up with much frequency here at the Planning Commission, we're asking you this evening to take a look at this and what I've provided. Happy to answer any questions, but we would hopefully have a motion of support and we'll move this on to the City Council for their formal consideration this evening. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks may have related to this.
Andy, do you have an extra copy of that?
I do not have an extra hard copy with me, but I certainly can print one out for you.
I don't have one, so.
Certain. It's a 2-page document, but I can print one out for you this
Okay.
evening.
Andy, maybe could you talk a little bit about what the city's responsibility, the city meaning the general taxpayers or general fund, what their responsibility would be in these types of projects at the airport?
Yeah, great question. So we treat the airport as sort of a self-funded entity. Obviously, it is an asset for the citizens of Fort Atkinson, but it's used by a very small number of citizens in Fort Atkinson. In fact, many folks that use this are transient pilots and things of that nature. We have a gas tax that's applied to all the fuel that we sell out there that is 10 cents per gallon that comes back into the funding for airport operations. And as part of the various bipartisan infrastructure funds that have been doled out, as well as the COVID funds that have been doled out, the airport stands to receive about $75,000 in cash, essentially, that will go into that airport account. So when we're talking about anywhere from a 3% to 5% funding commitment or cost share, that $75,000 will go a long way towards that. So we don't anticipate any significant inputs from the general fund or the taxpayers, if you will, of the city of Fort Atkinson for these improvements. Now, that's not to say some of these large ticket items in the future, if deemed appropriate, and go through obviously the Planning Commission review and City Council review, may require some additional input, but nothing on the near-term horizon will require that.
Yeah, I will just also mention that in our budget document, the airport is its own fund, and that's Fund 20. It's it's outside of the general fund in the budget document. So you can see that we do an annual budget for the airport. The proposed 2023 budget does not include a lot of this federal money, as we didn't quite understand the extent of what we would be getting and when. It's just mainly the operating budget. And as Andy mentioned, most of them fall into kind of that capital category. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that there are not general tax dollars at this point being spent on these types of projects. And any sort of planning study, which we had an airport committee meeting last week,
Mhm.
I believe, and the airport, we had gentlemen from, you're gonna have to help me with their-
Mead and Hunt, I believe it was.
Okay, and they presented some information to the airport committee about planning that long-term master plan that's required when we do these types of projects. And we were, I think everybody in the meeting was quite surprised at the cost of one of those plans, but it's also there's a lot of and I'm not even going to use the right verbiage, but when the airplane flies above and they take all the and they take they take all the measurements and even just that fly through, I think they were saying was about $70,000. So it obviously goes up from there. But I did just want to note that even with that plan, whatever the cost of that plan would be, there are some CARES Act funds, there are some other BIL money from the federal government that's coming down that would serve as the city's 5% match for that. So we would not be using general fund tax dollars. Any questions from the Plan Commission for Engineer Selly?
Yeah, I'm a little curious. What benefit or usage would we see down the road moving forward with this that we're not seeing currently? Is there, you mentioned that we've been, the city's been approached about like hangar space, et cetera. I guess a concern I have of mine, and now granted, I want to do its best for Fort Atkinson, but the federal government can tend to waste money on projects that don't have real value although our commitment may be only 5% of that cost. But is it the right thing for the overall expenditure of money going into this? Is it going to have a benefit to the community and, or even local and state?
Yeah, I see exactly what you're asking, and we have talked about that actually ourselves. So I would categorize the benefits at two levels. There is a local benefit that is fairly small, and by that I mean we get calls fairly frequently for folks that are flying in with their family. They're going to have dinner up the road. And maybe they'll come into Fort and spend the night, see some friends or whatever, and then head out. So those sorts of trips are generated by the airport. We do have local pilots, private pilots that are out there. We have two businesses that are out there. We have the skydiving company run by Bo Babovich, and then we have the Chem Air run by Jeff McDermott that flies helicopters all around the country. I would put that into kind of a higher level of benefit, right? We have we're supplying some jobs, and those jobs, or I'm sorry, we're supporting companies, and those companies have employees that live and work within the area. The very high level, when we start talking about investments out there with respect to extending runways, extending taxiways, building an FBO, which is essentially, it would be the combination of both a gas station and a mechanic on site at these places. That starts to get into the realm of corporate usage. So we do have a number of corporate folks here in the city of Fort Atkinson that they use the airport. They'll run a jet in here half full of fuel in order to utilize our short runway. And fly folks from Green Bay Packaging is a good example of folks that have come in here and used the airport and have indicated that they would use it more frequently if we had a longer runway. It also allows us to have discussions about bigger items, such as locating an aviation business here. Now, that's definitely a bit pie in the sky. But I can tell you that we are able to have those discussions because of the availability of this money, right? So President Scheer on the city council is an avid person engaged in aviation. He's not a pilot yet, but has shown a very vested interest in flying and the business of flying, and If you recall, our chamber director, Carrie Chisholm, was a licensed pilot as well. And so discussions were fostered among the three of us simply because of the opportunity that we had out there. So I do agree that there is it does seem to scratch your head a little bit when all of this money sort of begins raining down from the federal government. But it does have some real impact. And I think we can be judicious when it comes time to actually choose these projects in answering that question again. Does this really have the benefit that we expect here?
I will also just note, when you look at that staff report, the first page of that staff report, when it talks about the priorities, acquiring new snow removal equipment, replacing or upgrading field lighting, reconstructing or rehabilitating the apron, reconstructing, rehabilitating the taxiways and taxi lanes, and then that master planning are the first 5. So those are all things that if we want to continue to have the airport even in the space that it serves currently, we would need those things to be done in the future anyway. So if we can get federal funds to assist with that, that is all the better. And then we're not having to pay that cost individually or as a community through our taxes. And then I will also note just that acquiring new snow removal equipment, that will create a lot of efficiencies for us in not having to drive a plow from the city.
No, so the snow equipment that we need to manage the airport is the same snow equipment that we use to plow the city streets. So we won't house it out there. We'll keep it here and then we go out and plow. So that is a direct benefit, frankly, to the taxpayers of the city of Fort Atkinson, is the purchase of that plow. It will plow our streets here in the city and then also plow the runways out there. We try not to buy a dedicated piece of equipment for that area out there. So, so yeah, that in particular is actually one of the direct, I guess, impacts on the general fund and the taxpayers of the city in a positive way.
Okay, thank you. And I think these are things that I don't know if we would have discussed, so I'm glad I asked it and I'm glad you took the time to answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, the airport doesn't come up very often, so it's a nice forum to be able to put this out publicly.
One last question I have, you mentioned being approached of like hangar space, and this could lead to like a city-owned hangar, and then I would assume that would get leased out and could generate revenue.
It does. We
accurate?
have a Quonset hut out there currently that we lease out. I will tell you that the lease rates for hangars are extremely low. So we're not we are on the positive side of the investment, but it's not. We don't build a bunch of hangars just simply to suddenly gain a fairly significant revenue source there. I think the gain is more from the use of the infrastructure itself out there and the potential for business use.
I will just note too, in the 2023 budget for the airport fund, we have about $16,000 in revenue for the airport hangar leases. So we are currently leasing the hangars that the city owns on the airport property, and receiving revenue for that.
I
Any
have
other?
a few questions.
Sure.
Who actually applied for the COVID funding? Is that something the city applied for?
It's not something we had to apply for. We just simply had to, how would you term it? It was available to us. We simply had to show the impact that COVID had on our operations, and then we were given the money.
Okay. Okay. So that money is currently in the city's coffers.
Correct. We have the potential for $75,000, and I believe we've received somewhere in the neighborhood of like 30 to 40,000 of that, with the balance coming.
Okay.
We've just recently turned in all of the paperwork within the last couple of months.
Okay. And these questions aren't in any particular order, but I assume that once we get to the point of putting out an RFP for the master plan, that is, I mean, Mead and Hunt just provided some budgetary figures. They would have to submit a competitive bid along with 2 other
Yeah, all,
potential
the bidding process is
master
all
plan.
handled by the state Bureau of Aeronautics. So Mead and Hunt came in and I'm sure that they will certainly put forward a proposal, but there'll be multiple others that will receive that request.
And this is kind of a silly question probably, but the sheet that lists the local match total cost for the next 4 years is sort of color coded. What is the,
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
it's a chart or
Yeah.
like an Excel spreadsheet or something.
Right here.
Yeah. So what is the orange and the blue? Do those signify something in particular?
Yeah, they, I don't know, to be quite honest with you. They, I believe that these are priorities. This came from the Bureau of Aeronautics. And if I remember correctly, Mark was indicating that these were, I can't, I can't read the darn thing. It's the, yeah, the master plan was a priority. Let me see the brown one as you go down further.
Rehab runway,
Yeah.
construct vault building,
Yeah, design terminal building.
and then
Okay, then I think, no, I don't think those are priorities because some of those don't fall into priorities. So maybe those are different pots of money that there are 3 different pots that they were pulling from to accomplish some of these projects. So maybe that was their highlighted nomenclature to kind of categorize that.
okay. So that wasn't something that we,
No,
Color
this
coded.
is something that, yeah, the state, our airport representative, Mark Gretchkowski with the Bureau of Aeronautics provided us this. It's kind of a laundry list. Essentially what this list is if it's not on the list, you can't do it. But if it's on the list, you don't have to do it, if that makes sense.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the Plan Commission? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion to recommend City Council approval of the let's see, the resolution petitioning the Secretary of Transportation for airport improvement aid.
I
So
would move.
moved.
Thank you.
Eric took the easy way out.
Is there
I'll
a
second.
Thank you. Any final comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Final item on the agenda is adjournment.
I move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That motion carries at 7:37 PM. Thank you all.
4:30.